Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Savannah and I'll be your moderator for today. And before I introduce today's speaker, Robert, just want to take a moment to orient ourselves to GoToWebinar. So let's take a moment to take a look at some of the tools and functionality that we have available to us. So first things first, just a reminder for everyone that this webinar is being recorded and it'll be distributed to all of you who pre-registered, whether or not you're attending live or not. It'll also be available on our website after the fact. So if you know of someone who might benefit from this content, but they didn't register, they'll be able to access the recording online. Secondly, we have a submission area for questions in GoToWebinar. That's going to be the questions tab that's shown in this screenshot here. So please submit questions throughout the webinar. The format of today's presentation will be a combination of PowerPoint presentation and live software demonstration, followed by a Q&A at the end. So without further ado, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce today's presenter, Robert Hicks. Robert has been with the FlowCam team for 3.5 years and currently serves as our customer service lead. So many of you may know him from FlowCam training or support calls, and we're really excited for him to give us an overview today of some of the new features in Visual Spreadsheet, including metadata and exporting images and metadata to EcoTaxa. Take it away, Robert.
Thanks, Savannah. Hi, everyone. So today's learning goals for these new features in Visual Spreadsheet are going to be covering our new metadata tags features, as well as the new pathway for getting into EcoTaxa more directly from Visual Spreadsheet. So we're going to cover how to use metadata tags to label and organize runs, and then how to both create these templates and then get that data out of Visual Spreadsheet into EcoTaxa. So starting with metadata tags, metadata tags are a new feature that allows you to bring external data and associate it to a run. And once you've done that, you can then use these to filter, sort, and organize your data just to make it easier to get around when you have that big, long list of runs. Here are a couple of examples that somebody might use. Maybe you're going to attribute a water body where you collected that sample, or something about the depth it was collected at. All of these tags are customizable, both in the name and type, but also in what runs you're going to put them on. And then you can share them with collaborators, whether you're going to create those and push those out there to your satellite software or somebody else's FlowCam, or you're going to receive that from somebody you're working with. So jumping into the software, in Visual Spreadsheet, the first place you're going to go to start working with these metadata tags is going to be up here to Preferences. So here in the Preferences, where you are used to organizing your view, we have this new metadata tag manager where you're going to be able to select and organize what tags you want to see and where. So starting with this Tags tab here, we have a big list of everything, all of these different tags that I have. And some of them, these bottom ones here, replicate, reviewed, and these ones will come innately with the software. But other ones are custom built and can be put in based on your needs. So to add new tags, I'll just click this Add button here. And down here, I have my new tag. And so I can name it. Maybe I want to have an operator. So I can have an operator, and then I would put their initials in. And then in that instance, it might be a text field. But we do also have several other types. So text fields are going to accept any characters. Number fields are going to accept numerals, but also characters necessary for scientific notation. Flags are going to be a true or false. So as you can see with some of these things here, true or false, whether it's been reviewed or it's a blank run. And then these date, time, and time fields are going to be a formatted date time. So date is going to be year, month, day, and then time is going to give you an hours, minutes, seconds, 2 digits for each. Then the date time would be a combination of those. Once you've selected your field type, you can then decide if you're going to have a default value. So in general, most people might have these be empty, but if I am the standard FlowCam operator, I could make this a fixed value. So I could make it a fixed value, and I could put my initials RH. Or if you just want to have it default to, say, the last value that was used, that's also an option here. So if you're regularly switching between people and you want to just have that last person's initials put on there, you could select last value used. If I didn't want to see some of these, maybe I no longer need them, I do have the option to delete them. And if I am deleting something that is used anywhere in Visual Spreadsheet, you will get a warning that this has been associated. And so this might not be something that you added. It might be a run that you imported that somebody has put metadata onto. And so you just want to be aware before you delete something that it might be something that you're using. So I'm going to cancel out of that. Once you've set the names that you want, maybe I don't want operator down here at the bottom. This is how I'm going to toggle where it will be seen in my views and on the lists of properties. And I can use these arrows here to move them up and down. Once I have all the properties that I'm interested in set and in the order that I want, here in this settings tab, that's where I'm going to be able to toggle where I can see and interact with them. So this edit option here will either be in adding metadata after the fact or when I initiate a new run, and all of these things that I might want to populate. These post-process and imported options are defined by the software, and you're not going to be able to toggle that on and off. This will just automatically populate when you modify a run or when you import that in. This search option here is going to be what appears in your different data selection windows and allows you to search by different things. So maybe I want to be able to search by operator and water body, but maybe depth is not relevant for sorting or in searching there. Displays, that's going to be your particle property display in the view window. So you can toggle on under show particle properties, or maybe as you mouse over a different collage image, you will see particle properties, but now you can also show which metadata tags you want to see. This will be especially useful in sets made from runs that might have been different tags, or for example, in libraries where you want to see where those particles came from. And then this export here, that is going to be what exports when you export particle data and summary data. So I've now created my tags here. I've selected what I want to be able to see and where. And now I can go and try to apply them to different runs. So I'll click save. It's going to save all of my metadata tags. And I can now go up here to File, Edit Metadata. And I'm going to see this list of runs that I have on my instrument here. And so you can see that some of these runs I've already attributed data for. And here's my new column that I had selected under search. And now when I want to be able to search and sort by them, I can sort by any one of these properties depending on what I'm interested in seeing. But I can also search. So clicking the search button here, where previously we could only search by name, I could now go here and I can search by, for example, lake, and I can see all of these runs that are associated to my project that I've named Main Lake Survey. So for data organization, where there are maybe multiple projects being run on any instrument, this, even without using any of the other features that we're going to talk about later on, all of this is just innate in Visual Spreadsheet 6.1 now to be able to use these metadata tags. So if I want to now add information to this Casco Bay run that I have here, I can select it and I'll click edit. And now I have this window appear where I can start to toggle between these options. And it's going to give me all of the options that I've previously used in Visual Spreadsheet as options to select. So that should hopefully reduce data entry issues on projects that you're using regularly. But I can also type a new value if I want something new. For example, if this was something that I was working with the Casco Baykeeper, Perhaps that I'm going to name it based on that. A sample name. We have our run name here, but depending on how sampling works in your organization, you might have unique names for the actual sampling event that you want to attribute to that run differently than the actual run name, which is the FlowCam data acquisition event, and those might be distinct for you. Here in water body, I can type in Casco Bay, and then maybe I want to just grab Robert Hicks, put that in here, and I can start to populate these different values. Date and time are going to have some minor guardrails on them, and it's going to format that for you based on this here. Net mesh size, I can select that 20 micron, where previously I had this in my naming convention. I can now put that into that metadata. So here I can add that all, and now it has started to appear here. So for many folks that have lots of data in their databases now, they're going to have to come in here and do some of this manually. But for future runs, you're going to be able to have those populate when you initiate that run. So I'm on a satellite license, so we're going to use file processing mode. But if I go here and I start a new run, we have this new run information window here, where previously you would have selected stop conditions again. We're now going to be able to populate these values. And so you can see here, these are my default values of false and replicate 1. But then you can see that RH has already populated as operator initials. And so that'll be an option to have these default values pre-populate to save time. And so I could go here and I say, maybe I'm working on the lake survey today, and maybe I have a numerical sample name that's a barcode that I use, and maybe this is another run that I'm doing of that same sample, and I can just go along and select these values that are applicable to my sample. And when I click OK, it'll roll into that same standard run naming convention that you would be familiar with seeing, but there will be these additional metadata tags available to you. When the run ends, we're now going to be able to see all of the data that we're used to seeing, but in the context summary, there is this metadata field, and it will have a list of all of your tags and what the values are there. So if I go here and I open data, we have my tags. I can sort by my lake survey here. Baykeeper comes to the top. When I open that, I'm now going to have these values that I've populated over here. So all of this will be available regardless of whether you're going to get into EcoTaxa. But many of these lat long and depth collection things are things that people are using in EcoTaxa when they're wanting to pull in external data. But regardless, it will be there in Visual Spreadsheet 6.1. So moving on to the next topic after metadata tags, we can go to EcoTaxa report templates. So this is a place where we're going to have a practical application of these metadata tags for bringing in that external information and applying that along with all of the particle properties for pulling into EcoTaxa, which many people are using these days. These templates are customizable and reviewable, but they're also shareable. And that's going to be kind of one of the biggest adds here is the ability to share these templates and all work using the same templates, pulling the same data into your projects on their platform. So where previously we went to preferences to access our metadata tags, those EcoTaxa reports are going to be under here, under tools. So here I can pull up that report template editor, and you can see that I have a few examples that are already pulled up. This EcoTaxa report and the flow process report are both available on our website, and I would highly recommend anybody who's interested to go download those and use them as a starting place, because as you'll see in a moment when I just open a new one, there are quite a few options that are going to be applicable to most users, and starting from from that report is a good place to start. But if I want to start a new one, I can go here to File and New, and I can name it Example. And when I open it here, I'm going to have this report template editor with my name of my report up here, and then a few pre-selected options that are required by EcoTaxa. So this image file name, this object ID, which is going to be your individual particle, and then the acquisition ID, which is going to be your run name. Sample ID is something that is necessary if you're going to use any of these metadata tags to give information about a sampling event. And in this case, we've set it to run name. But if I did have a sample name here, I would be able to push that over and replace my sample name with my run name. And that's really going to depend on the specific needs of the operator and who are, for example, trying to feed into an existing pipeline and exactly matching their data versus building out something new where maybe you don't have specific sample names. So particle data here, these are going to be your object properties that go with this particle image object ID here. And I can select any properties that I want, multi-selecting by holding Control and pushing those over here. And then we're going to have names based on the property. Those names could be edited if desired by double-clicking and changing the name. Similarly, I can come over here and pull in summary data, which is going to be pulled from your context summary, this run summary information over here. And depending on what information you want to have contextually around your run, you might select some of these things and push them over. These things are going to have acquisition prefixes, which in EcoTaxa is telling you that came from the acquisition of the actual run. So to give an example of that, in EcoTaxa, you have different portions of the event that leads to having a vignette or collage image in their platform. So there's the sampling event, where you actually physically collect the water from your water body. There's the acquisition event, where we take this picture shown in the yellow box and actually take a picture of the sample. And then there's the process step, where you apply your segmentation algorithm to remove it. And then there's the actual object that comes out the other side that has been segmented and has associated properties. And depending on what you're doing, you might need to get more or less detailed on this because there is a limit to how many different attributes you're allowed to have in each field. Object is, there's 500 properties, so it's functionally unlimited for the purpose of FlowCam. But if you're going to have quite a bit of acquisition and process information, you may need to, excuse me, get more detailed on how you do that. And so that's where I have this example of a detailed report, which is just this EcoTaxa report. We've added a little bit more to it. So when I open that, we have quite a few sample options in here, but I now have that sample name where I'm potentially pulling in that numeric value from a barcode or similar that I might be using. And down at the bottom, I've differentiated out some things from the process steps from acquisition to differentiate between the act of taking a picture, the hardware used, basic capture filters, things like that, versus, for example, the pixel threshold that I might want in there. Whether to include different things is somewhat of a judgment call based on the needs of the project, but anybody who is trying to match things already being used in EcoTaxa may need to come in here and get more detailed with these different options. The data types are always going to need to be included, and currently we only have this EcoTaxa TSV as an option for a report template, but the hope is to, in the future, have different options for different report types. Once I have customized this, I can save it, and now it's going to be available for use here in this list. A note about modifying and saving as: when I open this, there is only the option to save from within this template editor. So if you want to iterate on this and duplicate it into a different option, You're going to want to select it, go to File, Save As, and call it a new name where you can now modify it, and this one will stay in place. Similarly, for accessing different features, importing and exporting of the template itself will happen through this template manager here. So if I want to import it, I can go here to File, and whatever I have available to import, perhaps you grabbed that one off of our website, also available through the tech note that some of you may have read. You'll be able to pull that file in. Or if you have customized something that you want to share with collaborators, or you want to pull it from your FlowCam and put it onto your satellite license, similarly, you'll be able to export it from the database into the standard Windows file structure. So once I've created my EcoTaxa report here, I'm going to be able to go and apply it to different data types. So EcoTaxa exports are going to take the visual spreadsheet image, and it's going to specifically format it for different, for exactly what EcoTaxa wants to see. And so that specifically requires a zip file. And in that, it's going to have the images, a tab separated value file, which is going to give you a row for every object or particle image, and then a column per attribute. And so each attribute is going to be one of those things that we've selected in our report template there. And these can be applied to runs, but also as of yesterday, where there was a new release. So if anybody who's previously downloaded this 6.1 version, you'll want to update it because we've now added the ability to add in sets, libraries, and classifications. And so to do that, we're going to be able to pull in all of your previously classified data, things that you've previously done a lot of work on in Visual Spreadsheet. It'll be pre-classified and pre-categorized for when you pull it into EcoTaxa, which will allow you to kind of save on the work that you've already done. So where we built our report here under EcoTaxa, we're now going to be able to use that export here under our File and Exports window here. So going to File, Export, and EcoTaxa, that's where you're going to be able to select one or more runs, sets, libraries, or classifications. And you're going to be able to use different report templates for different needs. Some people might only ever need one, and some people may have more than one that they use for different applications. So based on this drop down here, I have that list of all of my reports. I can select that, and then I can multi-select based on this. This is another place where I'm going to be able to sort and search based on my metadata tags and other attributes. So I can sort by name, but I'm also going to be able to search and pull up just the runs that I want. So in this case, I want those 3 Casco Bay runs here. I'm going to be able to grab the 3 of them and export them. When I go here to export, it's going to apply this report template to those 3 runs. And by default, it will name it example EcoTaxa report, and it's going to save it as a .zip file. It's not mandatory for it to be saved from Visual Spreadsheet as a .zip, but it does need to be a zip file when porting into EcoTaxa, and so that will be something that you would need to do later on. And so if I want to export this, I can go here and I can save that. It's going to say exporting report while it does that. And when it's done, it will give you a notification that it's succeeded. It's individually exporting each one of those runs and creating the necessary file structure for EcoTaxa to accept it. Once the export is complete, we get this window, and I can click OK. If you wanted to modify that file, you could do so. But in general, for most folks, I think you're going to be able to do most of what you need to do directly from Visual Spreadsheet with those metadata tags and that report template. So then once I've created this, I'm going to go into EcoTaxa. And so if I pull up their website here, if you haven't used their platform before, you'll make an account and then you'll have different projects that you use. So in this case, I only have one project, but I can go here and I can select my project, testing 1, 2, 3, and I can choose to work on this project. So where here I had these particles previously in my project, I can now come up here to project and import images and metadata, and I'm going to be able to import that TSV file. So where's my import option? I can select a zip file. Where is my option for this? There we go. So I can come in here and I can select my file for importing in, and then I'm going to be able to pull that in. So if I browse my local directories and I go here to my where did that go? One moment, please. Okay, yeah, browse local files, my mistake. So here I'm going to be able to see the zip file. Directories would have pulled everything that I had in there. I can grab this, and it's now going to start importing that in for use in my project. And from there, you would have all of your particle images in EcoTaxa. For anybody who is using the options that I mentioned of the classifications and libraries, those are going to have a tag associated to them that labels it based on the classification. And so there is this option here of use class name as an annotation category. So if you are an existing user and your classes in Visual Spreadsheet match a name in an existing project in EcoTaxa, you're going to be able to directly pull them in there and have it automatically attribute it to that grouping. But for newer users, you would likely want to deselect this, and then you will have it come in there and you'll be able to search and sort and filter by the classes that you've assigned to it or the libraries and that name that's associated to it. And then you're just kind of that one step closer to having things in your taxonomic tree in EcoTaxa. Once my project is done uploading, then all of those things will be in my project and I can begin the process of annotating and attributing them to a taxonomic tree. One note that I forgot to mention when talking about metadata tags is where you're going to be able to import and export those. So I guess a minor distinction between the export options and import options here versus where we were pulling in that EcoTaxa report. This is going to be more the data and the specific tags. So here is your EcoTaxa data export, and here is where you can export the metadata tags. Versus in here, just to differentiate between the export for going into EcoTaxa and the template that you're going to use in Visual Spreadsheet, this is where you're going to be able to import and export that template versus the data itself. So just a clarification there. That is most of what we have for the overview of the new options in this. A note on compatibility. So all the features that we just talked about are specifically available in Visual Spreadsheet 6.1, which released recently. And so anybody interested in these features will need to upgrade their satellite software and or instrument to work with it. There will be 2 license keys for it. If you're just going to use metadata keys, metadata tags, there will be 1 key that will enable 6.1 and its base functionality. Anybody who's interested in EcoTaxa specifically, they will want to let myself or whomever else you're dealing with on the support email that you also want the additional EcoTaxa key to enable that functionality. It's not an additional paid thing on top of any paid upgrades you might need to do to be eligible for 6.1, but it is just a toggle on and off feature with that license key, and you'll just want to let us know that we do that. All of our current hardware platforms, the FlowCam 8000, 5000, and Macro, can run Visual Spreadsheet 6.1. Anybody using an older system, you would want to talk to us to see if that was something that you could use. And that is what I had for you today on Visual Spreadsheet 6.1.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robert. Great presentation. This is a great orientation, I think, to some of the new additions in Visual Spreadsheet, and hopefully some tools that people will really be able to take advantage of in the future. So just a reminder, if you have a question sitting in your brain that you haven't submitted yet, please use the question icon in GoToWebinar to add your question to the queue for our next segment. Today, Robert's going to be focusing primarily on questions related to the mechanics of what's new in Visual Spreadsheet, basically everything you saw today or clarifications about what you saw today. But we do hope to have additional resources available in the future for people that are interested in learning more about EcoTaxa, for example. So with that, let's kick off our Q&A with a question about data compatibility. You touched on this briefly at the very end, Robert, but just to clarify for users, if someone has acquired data on their FlowCam using an earlier version of Visual Spreadsheet, so that could be Visual Spreadsheet 6.0, any version of Visual Spreadsheet 5 or 4, can they still use these new features once they upgrade, or do these new features only apply to data that was collected with Visual Spreadsheet 6.1?
Yeah, good question. So anybody who has collected data on Visual Spreadsheet 5 or 6.0, you're going to be able to directly upgrade your existing instance of that software to 6.1, and then all of the data in your database currently will be able to be used with these features. Anybody having collected data on an earlier version that didn't use the database, so 4 or even 3, there are pathways to get that data into Visual Spreadsheet 6.1. You would just want to reach out to us to make sure that if there are any intermediate steps for compatibility with early versions, that we make sure everything gets in there smoothly for you and as easily as possible.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. I think that's important, especially for people who haven't maybe been around since they got their FlowCam and haven't been through an upgrade before. It's, I think, a really important clarification. So we got lots of great questions rolling in. Thank you, everybody. Let's see. Do you know how many files or runs, let's say, can be exported at one time? Do you know if there's a set limit on that?
I'm not aware of a set limit. I think it tends to be more of a practical limitation of that EcoTaxa import might still be happening. So nope, it looks like it finished. But if you went to you just had a ton of runs all in one import, you would just not be able to annotate your project in EcoTaxa until it was done. But I'm not aware of a limitation on how many runs you can put into that one zip folder.
Gotcha. Cool. So in summary, no known technical limit, but from a practical standpoint and the time that you want to take, maybe more of a practical limitation. Got it. Thanks for that. Let's see. For this question, it might be helpful to toggle back to Visual Spreadsheet if that's easy enough. Yep. The question is if you could review the that box about automatically importing class labels when you go to export data to EcoTaxa. Could you just review that checkbox one more time?
Sure. So here under our EcoTaxa exports, under classifications, so when you have previously classified a run, and in this case, this has been classified and there were classes that I have assigned names to and put particle images into it. If I select this box, it's going to look at that when it goes into EcoTaxa, and it's going to value there that it's going to attempt to assign it to a specific category existing in your EcoTaxa project. Whereas if I don't have this, there will be category options that I can filter by. For example, if I had a class of Dolichospermum, there would be a line in that, a column in that export that will say that this has been classified as Dolichospermum, that I could then sort and filter my data in EcoTaxa using that classification, but I'm still going to manually stick it into that class. And so for most people starting out, they're probably going to leave this off until they've built it out. But then you could go back into Visual Spreadsheet, change the name of your classification to exactly match the groups that you're putting things into in EcoTaxa, and then it would be able to shunt it more directly in there for you once you're up and running.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for clarifying. I think hopefully having that distinction will help users of varying levels of experience with EcoTaxa. So if you're less experienced, you can just import those class names and assign them to your taxonomic tree and get to know the interface. And then for people that are more experienced, like you said, import those class labels directly as an annotation label in EcoTaxa. And right now the default predicted status or annotation status comes in as predicted, if that's helpful for any of you who have used EcoTaxa before. Great, thanks, Robert. Next question, a little bit more straightforward or simple. Do the images and TSV files get uploaded separately to EcoTaxa, or do they get uploaded together? For this question, it might actually be helpful to maybe go into your zip file in Windows Explorer and just orient us to what's in that folder.
Yes. If I bring this over. So here in my example EcoTaxa report export, I have 3 files, one for each run. And in that run, I'm going to have all of my collage image files, each one with this value here. And then I have my TSV file where for every row, there's going to be one of these names. And then there's going to be a column for every attribute. So that gets pulled into EcoTaxa. And when it gets pulled in, every collage image, when I go to look at it, or I guess they call it a vignette in EcoTaxa, all of these properties from this report will have brought in to be attributed to that specific particle image. And so then you could have that data for use in whatever application you need in EcoTaxa to sort by, or to use as some of these classifiers that they have baked in there. Did that get at the question?
Yeah. So I think for those of you listening, in summary, I think the short answer is yes. The images and associated particle and metadata get imported into EcoTaxa together. And maybe Robert, while we're here, do you mind changing your view so that we can see the gallery of images? That might be useful for people just to kind of see how the vignettes appear. I just mean like in that Windows Explorer.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
Or in EcoTaxa, either way.
So if I go to my view here and I can see my large icons, so I'm going to have all of my particle images. It might not let me because it's zipped.
No worries. Cool. Well, we can see them in EcoTaxa behind there.
So here we have them in EcoTaxa, and when I click on these things, that I can see information about this particle and specifically what attributes it has, and then I can sort by different attributes. So here in this case, I was sorting by a channel peak from our Cyano system, but you could select different properties to sort by as you're trying to go through and taxonomically organize these different organisms.
Perfect. Yeah, I think it's helpful to see, especially for people who may have used EcoTaxa before, either with older versions of the FlowCam or older instruments, just to kind of see what those vignettes look like. It basically takes the segmented images from Visual Spreadsheet and pulls them right into EcoTaxa. And I think this tool is going to be really valuable for people who still want to take advantage of some of the tools, explore the tools in EcoTaxa, but don't have raw images saved. So this just takes the vignettes as they were prepared in Visual Spreadsheet and pulls them into EcoTaxa with the metadata and particle data with them, which is really great. Cool, so let's go back to our question list. This is I think a clarifying question of something you said earlier, Robert, but maybe phrased in a slightly different way. When someone upgrades from Visual Spreadsheet 6.0 to 6.1, will the data in their database be overwritten? Like, do they need to worry about that transition?
No, so your data will not be overwritten. It's taking that existing database and just lifting everything in it up to the newer level. It's always a good idea to have backups in general across all computer systems, but in general, it's not going to do anything to your data other than add these features on and do some wizardry in the database on the back end. But really, all of your data will still be there, and that's where that's just going to be that easiest path versus for where you would have to then import it into that new instance of Visual Spreadsheet.
Perfect. Thank you. And next question, again, this is a question where it would be helpful to toggle back to Visual Spreadsheet. Someone's wondering if you could review just where to go to create or edit an EcoTaxa report template, just to see the mechanism of where things live.
Yep. So here we're going to go to Tools, and where you were previously classifying things here, similarly, you're working with a different type of classification, so that helps for people to kind of model where we've organized these things. Here you can have your different report templates, so you'll have a list of any ones that you previously used. And so I can select this one that I imported from our website, and I can now go here and I can open it. And so once it's open, I'm able to look at these different properties. Maybe some of these are relevant to you, maybe they're not. Maybe you have a non-laser system, so you don't want to have these channel properties in there. For example, I could put those out of there, and I could push them over and save this as something that maybe is more directly applicable to what you're doing. And then similarly, it'll give you a warning if you don't want to change it. No, I don't want to keep those changes. And this is also where you're going to have your import and export options. I guess I should note, if you end up with a big long list here of different iterations of things and you want to try to clean it up, you're not going to delete report templates from here. That will be from the usual place where various data types can be deleted over here under delete data. So it's now under this DSV templates, and I could select some of those, this example that I made that I don't want anymore. I could now delete that and not have that in my list, just to keep things organized and clean.
Perfect. I'm glad you thought to mention the delete button too, because I think that's for people that may be using older versions of Visual Spreadsheet, but still are familiar with the database format. I know that delete functionality was a feature that came a little bit later. So the ability to delete runs, delete classification templates. So that's a really handy tool just in general. So thanks for going over that. Let's go back to our list of questions. General question about metadata. Is it better to set up the metadata for a run before running a sample, like if you're on the FlowCam, or adding it to a run after you acquire the data?
I guess that's hard to say. It might depend a little bit on the nature of your sample and how quickly you're trying to go through it. I think in general it's going to be easier to put all of those tags in at the time of capture. So maybe you come in here and you're going to start your run, and I can come in, I can put in all of this data, but then I can now go and agitate my sample and do any final prep that I need to do and introduce it and press go. And so that way you don't have any settling or stratification of your sample here. Obviously, you could do that after the fact, but it's going to be a little bit harder to take advantage of the default features thing. And I think that especially the things like the last used will be quite helpful. So being able to come in here, I think for most folks, there's going to be, there are only a few operators that are using. So if you are, for example, going to have a fixed value for operator, it can either just be the same or having it set as that last use value, and then it's just going to just populate it as you go, and just keep you moving along with all of this data associated to it right off the bat.
Perfect.
I don't know if that answers it exactly. It's kind of it's really going to depend on your workflow. But I guess personally, I'm excited to be able to put it on there as I collect it, just so it's already there and ready to go.
Yeah, me too. And that ability to set how you want your defaults to work, whether you want the default just to be blank for those things that are changing from sample to sample, or keeping a default value that's, whatever I used the last time I was on the FlowCam. So hopefully some good flexibility baked in there, I think, to make it as useful as possible to a variety of groups. Great. A few more questions here. This is more of a storage question, so I think it might be beneficial to go back to your Windows Explorer for this. This person's wondering, if we're exporting a lot of data to EcoTaxa, do we need to worry about the exported files taking a lot of computer storage? So maybe it would be useful to kind of just take a look at how big these files were, for example, because obviously how big those files are is going to depend on the size of your run and how many images were in it. But it might be useful just to kind of get a feel.
As with kind of most things related to capturing data on the FlowCam, the unfortunate simple answer is it depends. Somebody with a color camera versus a black and white camera is just going to have larger files, image files generally. But as you can see, I mean, these were for 3 runs, and it's not very large. It's only 14 megabytes. And so if I went here and I opened those 3 runs, once I have one of them open, it's gonna. So now I could grab those 3, and just in terms of general attributes of this, they're 400 particles per run, so they are not massive runs, but pulling up some of the particles, there are some decent sized images in there. So in terms of it just being a fairly average run, having those 3 there in a 14 megabyte file, it's not a humongous file, but data management will still be. It's not like the raw camera images that many folks are used to managing, but it'll still be something to keep an eye on.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Good answer. And I think this might be actually a good point to mention too when it comes to just the physical workflow. Is another consideration is whether, if you plan to use EcoTaxa, is whether or not your FlowCam is connected directly to the internet. Because if it's not, a natural step will be to take those zip files that you just exported, export or copy them to an external hard drive, and move that to a computer that does have internet access to finish the upload. So that's a point at which you could also introduce additional storage if you wanted to keep those exported files. But the nice thing is you have them on either end. You'll have those files or those images saved in Visual Spreadsheet, and we're basically just copying them into a different format, and then they'll be imported into EcoTaxa. So good question. I think this might be the last one we have for now, which is for people that want to consider an upgrade. I think this person in particular says they have Visual Spreadsheet 6.0. How would they go about proceeding with an upgrade from here?
So depending on whether you're already eligible or not, folks on service plans that are on 6 are already eligible to download and install 6.1. But basically, once eligibility or orders or whatever is handled, the next step would be to go to our customer support center on our website, which has quite a few resources available generally, but there's specifically an option to download the Visual Spreadsheet installer. And so that will apply for both satellite licenses and the instrument. And so that same installer could be run on the instrument. It will upgrade your the software on that instrument currently. And then if you already had satellite instances, same, it would upgrade that, or you could install new ones using that same installer. There will be a question when you do run the installer looking for the database password. In most instances, you can reach out to us and we can provide that for you to enable the software to make changes, fundamental changes to the database. And then once it's installed, you can put in a license key that you would get from us for the software that would enable the features.
Great, thank you. And now we have actually one more question that I think is really useful and I want you to speak to. You may have touched on this in your initial demo, but while you're still in Visual Spreadsheet, this question is asking if you made a mistake with your metadata and you want to go back and correct it. Say you put in the wrong value for a specific field, you go and do your run and you're like, oh no, I made a mistake. How do you go back and update a specific metadata field after the fact?
Yeah, certainly. So that will be in the same way that you would if you were just adding these after the fact to a run that didn't inherently have metadata. So here, going to edit metadata, I have my runs, and for example, I know that these 3 runs were not collected by me; they were actually collected by Savannah, and it's not going to let me edit them because I currently have them open. But I could go here and I could close out of these runs, and then go back into my metadata editor, and I could select this and say, oh, that was not very honest of me to say that I did that work. I can come in here and say SS for Savannah, or I could come in and this date I was clicking too quickly and it pre-populated a date, but when I go here and I see that it was on the July 28th, I can come in and I can change that, and now it's gonna be on there. I don't have the date toggled on under search, so that's why we're not seeing that here, but we can see that operator initials has not changed.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, that'll be really helpful. I can see that happening to me when you're in a rush and just trying to crank through samples and, oh, got to tweak this after the fact, so that's perfect.
And I guess a further point on that, just in terms of, if you are worried about having, say, you had some sort of typing error and your water body is named incorrectly, that list of existing runs is only going to be tags that are currently in your database. So you're not stuck with a wrong name forever as being something that, say, a technician might accidentally select. If you go in there and you change that name, it's just reading a list of the existing tags. So as soon as you update that typo, it will no longer be in that drop-down list of things for you to look at.
That's nice. Good to know. Great. Cool. Well, that's all the questions we have for today. So I want to thank you, Robert, for putting together this great demonstration. And I want to thank everybody else who tuned in live today. Robert's sharing some really important email addresses, which hopefully if you're already a FlowCam user, you have these bookmarked in your email. But if not, definitely write them down. support@fluidimaging.com. Which is basically sets up a ticket so that Robert or someone on his team can follow up with you as quickly as possible. And that's for help with installation, licensing, or anything else like that, any sort of technical support needs you may have about Visual Spreadsheet or otherwise. And then the second email, orders@fluidimaging.com, is if you have questions about pricing and upgrades and things like that. So yeah, Robert, once again, thank you. We will be disseminating a recording of this to all of you who pre-registered, and it will also be available on our website. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it today and didn't pre-register, that link will be available soon. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Robert.
Yeah, thank you.